Any fan of Avatar The Last Airbender can talk for days about how amazing Uncle Iroh is, but not many like to talk about his most heartbreaking storyline, and that's because it involves the tragic death of his son, Lu Ten. Uncle Iroh was the voice of reason for almost every character throughout the show, but sadly, he may not have had that mindset had it not been for the death of his son. This means in order to understand who Uncle Iroh truly was, you're gonna have to have your heart broken and reconsider everything that happened to Iroh's son and the tragic fate that shaped Iroh into the lovable character that he is. Now, when it comes down to it, not much is actually known about Iroh's immediate family in Avatar The Last Airbender, and this includes his relationship with his late son, Lu Ten. According to the show, Uncle Iroh had Lu Ten while he was still in line to be the successor to the throne, and anyone who knows Iroh will understand that he loved his son with all his heart. But even though he had love in his heart and other ambitions in mind, Iroh was royalty, and therefore was basically forced into joining the military. Interestingly enough, though, his son followed in his footsteps, though it's unclear if that was due to expectations or simply because Lu Ten wanted to be like his father. The father-son duo took their jobs in the military very seriously, though the pair remained informal with each other even while on duty or in the presence of other officers, showing just how strong of a bond they really had. However, their jovial time together could only last so long, and sadly, on an action that was commanded by Iroh, Lu Ten's life came to a tragic end. You see, Iroh had a vision when he was younger that inspired him to launch a siege on Ba Sing Se, the Earth Kingdom's most well-defended city, and sadly the siege proved unsuccessful, but what was even worse was that Lu Ten didn't make it out of the fight alive. His cause of death was ambiguous, but most people presume that he was killed on the front lines during the heat of war. That being said though, you can never be sure what the truth really is, and all we know is that Lu Ten's death deeply affected Iroh and totally changed his outlook on life. Now, there are a few interesting theories about how Lu Ten actually died, but none stand out more than the idea that he was secretly killed by the Fire Nation. According to this theory, they simply used the cover of battle as a scapegoat and an excuse to get close to the young general to ensure that he was killed. And if you're wondering who in the Fire Nation could have possibly plotted such a nasty plan, look no further than the dastardly Fire Lord himself, Ozai. Though at the time he wasn't Fire Lord yet. In fact, before Lu Ten's death, Ozai wasn't even next in line to be Fire Lord, and that gave him all the more reason to act out against Iroh's son. If you watched Avatar, then you know that Ozai was a character that would do anything to get his way, no matter how dark or corrupt it might be. He even scarred his own son in an Agni Kai in order to punish him and make a point that no one is above the law in the Fire Nation. It was a pure power move and proved just how terrible Ozai really was. Now, if he was that harsh with his own child while he was already Fire Lord, imagine how ruthless Ozai would have been to ensure that he got to sit on the throne instead of Iroh, who at the time was the rightful heir. And that's where Lu Ten came into play. Ozai knew that Iroh planned to rule the Fire Nation alongside his son because the two were really close. And it was during a time when Iroh embraced the idea of becoming Fire Lord. In fact, Iroh even claimed his blood boiled with desire for power during those days. So Ozai would know that he needed to cripple his brother mentally to secure his position as the next Fire Lord. And according to this theory, he did just that. The only fact that's known about Lu Ten is that he died during or shortly after the siege of Ba Sing Se, which he and his father took part in. And well, that would have been the perfect cover for an assassination attempt. Not only would killing Iroh's son break his spirit, but it would also be easy to get away with it in that setting. In the world of Avatar, Ba Sing Se was meant to be an impenetrable city, so having a general die during a siege there wouldn't be surprising or hard to orchestrate. Especially for Ozai, who was shown in the series to have connections to multiple dangerous hitmen and women, any of whom he could have hired to take out Lu Ten. And according to this theory, that's exactly what happened. Ozai placed a hit out on Lu Ten, and when that was completed and Lu Ten was dead, he used it as a power play for the throne. Only when he explained it to his father, Fire Lord Aslan, that his brother Iroh was unfit to rule the Fire Nation, Aslan would disagree, which ultimately led to Ozai killing his own father and taking the throne by force. And while Ozai did get the throne, Iroh lost a son, which caused him to totally rethink the ways of the Fire Nation. But whether it was Ozai's plan or not, Iroh's son Lu Ten died. died, and that death changed the way that Iroh looked at the world entirely. Some might say that it broke him, while others may speculate that it saved him, but no matter how you look at it, the death of one's child is always heartbreaking. But Iroh not only lost a son, he likely blamed himself for Lu Ten's death as well, and his troubles didn't end there. On his way back from the siege, Uncle Iroh learned that his father had died under what were supposedly mysterious circumstances, but what really turned out to be murder at the hands of Ozai, the new Fire Lord. At this point in his life, according to the story of Avatar, Iroh lost the desire for power that once drove him, and he didn't even consider fighting Ozai for the throne. Iroh then decided to step back from his duties, and instead of returning to the Fire Nation, he went on a worldwide journey and beyond. As shown by his character in the show, Iroh's time away from the Fire Nation helped him understand the world better than the rest of the soldiers that he grew up with. Lu Ten's death helped him realize that there were more important aspects to life than power and status, and it was now at this point in time that Iroh took on the relaxed, tea-loving lifestyle depicted in this series. Now, though Iroh was at peace, there still probably wasn't anything he wouldn't give to give Lu Ten his life back. Little did Iroh realize, though, that he was going to get a second chance at fatherhood through his relationship with his nephew, Prince Zuko. If there was one thing that Uncle Iroh learned through the tragic death of his son, was to not squander the time he had with his loved ones and to not feed the hatred within them. The first time Iroh appeared was as Prince Zuko's uncle and his right-hand man on his hunt for the Avatar. And though that was an inherently violent mission, it was clear that all Iroh wanted was for Zuko to achieve the sort of inner peace that he had. Iroh could see the anger that poured out of Zuko and knew that a lot of it came from the boy's father, or Iroh's brother, Ozai. After all, Zuko was scarred for life and exiled by Ozai for simply speaking out of turn during a military meeting when he was still a child. Uncle Iroh could see that anger through the young child that he once taught to play Pai Sho. The bond between Iroh and Zuko continued to grow throughout the series and created some of the best character development to ever grace the small screen. Or just in general, it was just that good. At first, it seemed like Iroh couldn't get through to Zuko as he tried to talk him down from his violent path and away from the anger that filled his heart. There was even a point in the series that Uncle Iroh couldn't take watching Zuko go down the same destructive, war-torn path that claimed the life of his son. And after Zuko accepted an offer from Azula to take over the Earth Kingdom and reclaim his own title as Prince of the Fire Nation, Uncle Iroh decided enough was enough. He switched sides and ended up protecting the Avatar with hope that his nephew would join him. Sadly though, this only resulted in Uncle Iroh being imprisoned, but Zuko almost immediately regretted what he did, and the two ended up having a heartfelt reunion in a way that a real father and son would. Lu Ten may have been Uncle Iroh's biological son, and what happened to him was a tragedy that changed Iroh's life forever, but at least Uncle Iroh was able to find someone to bond with in a similar way that he bonded with Lu Ten. It also worked out well for Zuko too, who, as mentioned before, had some of the best character development ever. However, none of this would have been possible though without the tragic death of Uncle Iroh's actual son, Lu Ten. But here's a question that I want to pose to you guys out there. What do you think Iroh would have been like if Lu Ten had never died and he was of sound mind to take over as Fire Lord? Would he have continued the imperialistic ways of the Fire Nation, or would he and Lu Ten have sought peace? Well, be sure to let me know in the comments below. As a huge Avatar The Last Airbender fan, I am very much looking forward to your comments.